So I guess we can start now. First of all, I will have some sentences in Hungarian and then I turn to you. So let's start. Okay. Szeretettel üdvözlök minden kedves nézőt a Zsidó és Izraeli Filmfesztivál kerekasztal beszélgetésén. A téma a zsidóság és a holokauszt megjelenítése lesz a német filmben. A beszélgetés nyelve angol, de feliratot lehet majd látni, ha minden igaz, már itt is van alattunk, úgyhogy én most át is váltok angolra. Welcome to every viewers in this panel of the Jewish and Israeli Film Festival of Budapest. And we will talk about the Jews and the Holocaust in German movies. My name is Bálint Kovács. I am a journalist from Hungary and I will be the moderator of this panel. And hello everyone, thank you for being here. Please, first of all, introduce yourselves in 2 or 3 sentences, not only your name, but your profession and your connection to the topic, please. Thank you. Maybe we start with Bert. And please turn on your microphone. Okay.
All right, I'm Bert Rebhandl. I live in Berlin. I'm an Austrian citizen. My profession is I'm a film critic and a cultural critic. I write for several newspapers and magazines. I also have a little magazine together with 2 friends. It's called Cargo. And I have followed cinema, global cinema, German cinema for 25 years professionally. And I have only once been to Budapest on a film mission. It was for a discussion about the work of Harun Farocki several years ago. So that are dear memories to me.
Thank you. Joshua?
Hi, everyone. My name is Joshua, and I am a programmer at the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival. I've been programming there for about 12 years now, and I'm also a filmmaker as well, and pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Jay?
Hi, everybody. I am a colleague of Joshua Moore. My name is Jay Rosenblatt. I am the program director of the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival and the Jewish Film Institute. And I'm also a filmmaker for the past 30 years or so. And I have not been to Budapest, but I'm good friends with Peter Forgash, the documentary filmmaker. And it's about my big connection, to be honest. I think some of my films may have played in Hungary, but unfortunately, I haven't been there yet. I'd love to go.
So thank you, everyone. Let's start the discussion about Germans, Holocaust, and Jews, and movies, of course. First of all, my theory that German filmmakers are better in this field. I mean, to face the sins of the Nazis, because every time I talk about this topic with professionals or my friends, everyone always says, yeah, of course, the Germans, they do it so well. Wish we could be like German movie makers or so. So what do you think? Is this true or not?
I'm not so sure that's true. I think it's a very mixed bag, so to speak. I think there are some really strong German films that deal with the Holocaust. And there are some that, to me, don't really deal with it in a way that it deserves. And to be honest, there's a Hungarian film, which I'm sure you're aware of, Son of Saul, which I think raised the bar for films about the Holocaust. And it's not a German film, but a Hungarian film. And I thought it was incredible, really original, and did something that no other Holocaust film has done, at least in my opinion, which is to give you the sense of what it may have been like. And didn't have all the sort of conventional formulaic narrative devices that we see in a lot of films. So, we could talk about specific films, but I don't think it's just across the board. German films are better around the Holocaust. I do think that Germany has dealt with their major role in the Holocaust more so than many other countries, like Austria, for instance. And I think that's been very important. And I hope that more countries step up to it like Germany has.
Yeah, that reminds me of that special sidebar that we did, Jay, about Austria's role in the Holocaust and some of the films that we showed in that program. But yeah, I agree that it's kind of a blanket statement, I think, to say that the Germans do it best. There's plenty of examples otherwise. And another Hungarian film that came to mind, which is immediately after the Holocaust, was the film 1945, which I think was an excellent film that really captured that time period in a way that I hadn't quite seen before, about Jews coming back to their town and having it have been taken away from them, and all the guilt that everyone felt over that. Yeah, I think there's plenty of other countries that have done remarkable Holocaust films.
I think we would also have to, from my perspective, it's even debatable if Germany is really the cinema nation, the country that has done the most important or very important films about the Holocaust. If I would have to make a list probably of the 10 most important films globally, I'm not sure even if a German film would make it. And if it would be a one that is probably very unknown or very little known, it's Land der Vernichtung by Romuald Kamaka, a documentary film that has not been very widely seen, about Operation Reinhard. And Romuald Kamaka in general is a filmmaker that I would really propose to get to see really all of his work. Yeah, but in German cinema, the entire complex of the Second World War and the Nazi regime, of course, has been very important. And there's a lot of films about Hitler, about the Third Reich, about the people, about the perpetrators actually, and about also the fate of the German people, of the German nation in the Second World War. And compared to that, there's a lot of films that also have been sort of blockbusters, for example, The Downfall being the most famous, of course. And compared to that, I think there's fairly little compared to that huge amount, that we have about the role of Germany from 1933 to 1945. We have comparatively little amount of films about the Shoah per se. I think Germany could have done a lot more about that. We have very interesting films about the Jewish existence in Germany after the war. And there's a lot of, we will talk about that a little later.
Maybe it's two separate topics. I mean, one topic is how good are the German movies about Holocaust. And the other topic is how do German deal with the theme, with the topic? I mean, how do they deal with the scenes that they themselves did in the Holocaust? How do they face the consequences of the wars, of the Holocaust, of killing the Jews? And maybe what I was talking about, my theory, is more about this. I mean, how good do they do this? How well do they face the sins of their own? What do you think? Do they do it exceptionally or not so much?
The question is to me?
For anyone who wants to answer.
Okay. If I can answer first, maybe I don't think it's even, I'm sorry, but I don't, no offense, but it's not a very meaningful question to ask whether there is an exceptionalism of German cinema in this question. I think this is a global question. It has become one even through the fate of the survivors who are now, who went to a lot of different countries. Some of them came even back to Germany or remained in Germany after the war. And it doesn't, Germany, of course, has, Germany was the first nation, the first state that has to deal with the legacy of it. We call it Vergangenheitsbewältigung. We have to come to terms with German citizens and German official institutions have to come to terms with the responsibility of the things that for the things that happened, and how to create a tradition of it that is responsible also until the contemporary, into our present times. Yeah, and Germany, cinema is a certain part of this big cultural endeavor to not forget, to not allow anything similar again to happen, and to also like create a sense that that nobody will forget what Germany actually did. Germany and Austria, and in the greater context of the Shoah, a lot of other people did during the Holocaust. And I think that this is a shared responsibility, so to speak, but Germany, of course, has the biggest task in a way because it was the core perpetrating nation.
There's an interesting documentary that we saw a few months ago. We haven't shown it yet, but it's called The Lesson. And it's a German documentary about how the Holocaust is taught in the school system in Germany. I recommend it.
Yeah, that film was kind of shocking with how little the younger generations knew of the history. Very, very surprising to see that.
I can also ask that, do Germany have anything to do with with facing the sins, which is not the same as the other nations? I mean, do Germans need to have better movies about Holocaust than like Hollywood or anyone, or is this a stupid thing to think that they have to do better movies?
I mean, I think everyone should strive for better for better Holocaust films, or better cinema in that regard. I was thinking about a film that came to mind that was kind of a mixed bag, a German film, I think from 2017, called Bye Bye Germany by Sam Gabarski. Have you all seen that film? I know you have, Jay. It takes place in a displaced persons camp following the end of the war. And it had a very peculiar tone, almost kind of a whimsical, colorful aesthetic to it. And it had humor, and it's obviously dealing with, a very weighty topic. But it's interesting when the film is from Germany and it's kind of going with this heightened style. And I believe it was fairly popular in Germany as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good example of the kind of films we really don't appreciate about the Holocaust, the Life is Beautiful type films that in some ways feel just tone deaf, disrespectful. There was one, Persian Lessons, that was at the Berlinale this past year, which I felt had that too. It's entertaining, some good characters, but ultimately just uses the Holocaust to tell a fictionalized story. And I don't know, it feels exploitive on some level. And we've seen many of those films. I think you can make an argument that even something like Schindler's List has elements of that. And Holocaust, that famous TV series, which was a big hit in Germany, has elements of that. So, you know, we're always looking for films that, you know, there's so many Holocaust films from all countries, not just Germany. And we're always looking for something that's original, that takes you to a place that, you know, isn't cliche, that you haven't seen before. And they're still out there. It's amazing. And unfortunately, it's a subject matter that has a lot of legs, so to speak.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, what we've seen is that the Holocaust film has become a genre of itself, for better or worse. And you know, we could divide that into the narratives and the documentaries, but you know, how do you take this subject and these themes that we've seen again and again and tell them in a compelling way? Or what are we learning that we haven't learned before? What's new? What revelations are still out there? Or what is just being told again and again that we've seen the same story of, you know, sometimes we call like the righteous Gentile film, where somebody who's not Jewish decides to put their life and their family out on a limb and help Jews. And it's a very admirable story, and it can be compelling drama, but what is the new territory? What's the new ground that we're covering here that we haven't seen before? I think these are kind of key questions to ask in this genre as we keep seeing more and more films. One film that just came to mind that I found very compelling, and I don't even think it was German. Jay, you'll have to help me out on this one, because I'm forgetting the title, that we showed a few years back. That was just an interview with a former secretary to Goebbels, I believe, or was it Himmler? A German Life, which was just her face on the screen almost the entire time. There was a few cutaways to some archival material. She was in her late 90s, I believe. It just had this very compelling face and skin, and her talking about her experiences. And it was cinematic and compelling and very fresh in its way.
I think it's very important that you mentioned Schindler's List, Jay, because that film by Steven Spielberg has been extremely influential in Germany. It has become more or less the official Holocaust film. It is taught in schools, like teachers who want to make the topic more approachable. They just screen Schindler's List for everybody, and it has become like a canonical, official, more or less like the official document of the Shoah. Yeah, and if we remember a little bit, if we go back to the huge debates that were going on around Schindler's List at the time, the attacks that Claude Lanzmann issued because he believed that Schindler's List was basically like the wrongest of possible films about the Shoah that he could think of. Yeah, of course, Lanzmann was very strict in the way he was talking about representability of the Holocaust, and he had a very, you could even say, fundamentalist position. But in Germany, in the popular culture of Germany, the Schindler's List position, you can say, the aesthetics of Steven Spielberg, that everything is depictable, yeah, that for everything there's a narrative way to show, yeah, has completely won over. Yeah, we have never had any director of a similar scope like Spielberg, but there was a very important producer who was responsible for a lot of films. He was Jewish, Arthur Brauner. He died at 100 years recently, and he made it his duty, you could say, yeah, to make Spielbergian Holocaust films. Yeah, he made a film about Babi Yar and other things, and they were all, in a way, very well intended, you know, but they were also, like, if you if you talk about like what can feature films do, they were a little bit naive. You know, they were just like they were, as you say, like it's this type of movie that Joshua probably had in mind when he was speaking about like a certain way of, how shall I say, you don't think much about the problems of representation. You just show directly. I think Persian Lessons is very much in the vein of this tradition. Yeah, it's also very well meant. It also gives us a chapter of survival. In this case, a very like this is almost a little genre in itself, like the survival story. The most hilarious, or most extraordinary, and most unlikely survival story. You know, there's even a little competition going on, almost, yeah, of topics like this. And I think it's really we cannot stress enough how important Schindler's List in Germany has been over the years.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear, Bert, because you could make the argument that it's reaching a lot of people that might not be reachable if it wasn't in that kind of narrative form. But it's just not, I guess there's a certain compromise that's made when that's the form that people take in and they see the Holocaust in that kind of Spielbergian way. It's not to say that, you know, sometimes you've got to reach people, you know, and those devices do work. You know, they're not going to watch a boring documentary about the Holocaust. So as a way of at least making people see something about it, I don't condemn it for that, but you have to go beyond that. Maybe that's the first film that opens some people up that have no idea what went on. And as we get further and further away, there's going to be more and more people that don't really get it. They don't, you know, they don't have the history. They don't have the family connections. And all the survivors are dying. There's not a lot of them left. So we're going to be entering into these new phases of how is it depicted in media. So, you know, it's complex. There's not just one way to look at it. And I don't condemn Spielberg for making that film. I just think that it's naive, like you say, to just see that as the depiction of the Holocaust, when it's really just one way of approaching it.
Mm.
Yeah, then we're getting into Holocaust as entertainment. And what does that mean? And I think, like what you said, Jay, as time goes on, these stories need to they need to evolve. I mean, we've already seen lots of stories about second, third, fourth generation survivors, or even Germans, that the trauma has kind of been transferred down through these generations. And to me, that's a very fascinating topic to explore that has been underexplored, I think, in this field. And I could see a lot more of that happening as we go further along. And I think it's also very important for German filmmakers, for Austrian filmmakers, for Polish filmmakers to make these stories.
There's one thing maybe, one thing maybe still worth mentioning, and I guess you're probably aware of it anyway, but I will still say it. Of course, in Germany, until 1989, we had two very, very different traditions of talking about the Holocaust in general, because the GDR, the communist part, more or less had this state history narrative that they were the successors of the resistance of the anti-fascist movement in Germany. Now more recently, we are reading very interesting and actually tormenting stories about the role of the communist groups in Buchenwald, for example. So that myth has been shattered, of course. It was never believable, very much anyway. And West Germany, of course, joining the Western Bloc very quickly after the war and joining NATO and becoming a part of the Wirtschaftswunder. It took for West Germany, as you very well know, quite a long time to deal with the Shoah and with the victims and with the guilt, with the people who were still there. They were like basically all of mid-management of the Shoah, of course, were still alive, were living in Germany, had respectable careers, and it took for a long time to start with the Auschwitz-Prozesse, which had also been then documented in very important films, to slowly get going. And basically, like the more important films in Germany, firstly in West Germany and later in reunified Germany, actually came like almost one and a half generations later. Yeah? It took quite a long time for Germany to really get going in dealing with, trying to cope with these things. Yeah.
It's good that you mentioned the past, because I wanted to ask the evolution of the German Holocaust movies. So you mentioned the first movies after the war, but how did they change? I mean, how were the first movies about the topic, and what was this process of changing until today?
I think this is very much a part of the bigger development of German post-war cinema, which had its periods or phases or waves or of course, new German cinema, if we take it very broadly, yeah, was more a critical cinema than a really popular cinema. And if we take films from the mid-60s to, let's say, the 80s, yeah, for example, with a director like Alexander Kluge, or even Fassbinder, who moved towards more popular forms during his career. Yeah. So we had this evolution of, very broadly speaking, a critical cinema becoming slowly a popular cinema, sometimes within one career, sometimes by succeeding people who followed in the footsteps of others. In my opinion, it's more interesting to maybe even speak about Jewish stories or Jewish characters in German movie, because sometimes the Shoah is present very implicitly in some films, by Kluge, for example. Yeah. One example that I still find extremely interesting, although it's a very controversial film, is of course the Hitler film by Syberberg, which is trying to have something like a speculative history, a philosophy of history of what happened in Germany, like an interpretation of the historical events in terms of almost a kind of like mysticism of Germanness, German nation, what it could be. Yeah. Fassbinder, of course, was very important with one film that was made by Daniel Schmid, in fact, about the Frankfurt Jew. I don't recall the title at the moment, but it was the film that Fassbinder was accused of being anti-Semitic about. Yeah. And more recently, we have these more popular attempts by directors like Danny Levy, yeah, to try something like almost like what Lubitsch did during the war, yeah, to deal with these things in a funny way, in a comedic way. Yeah. Danny Levy, who is Jewish himself, is a very important position in that. Yeah. And he's also like being part of X-Filme, which is the main German powerhouse production company, doing Babylon Berlin now, this very popular television show that shows us the story of the emergence of the National Socialism. So very broadly speaking, I would say it's an evolution from critical cinema to popular cinema, and a lot of the critical lessons of the heydays of new German cinema have been forgotten these days, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, kind of starting where you left off, Bert, about kind of more contemporary German cinema and how the Holocaust is still prevalent in those films. Like we see it coming up in surprising ways. There was a film that we showed last year that was set at a dinner party. And the premise is that the man who's hosting the dinner party is making a joke that he's going to name his son Adolf. And that brings up a lot of discussion. And it was a huge hit with our audiences. We were very surprised how popular this film was. I think it was based off of a play, if I'm not mistaken. So I think...
on a French play, actually. The German film was a French film, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a German film production. And I think the incidents like these are fascinating, contemporary stories about how the Holocaust keeps coming back and what modern Germans think about it.
I remember seeing Our Hitler, the Silberberg film. It was in the 80s, wasn't it?
77.
77, yeah, late 70s. That was quite an experience. It was like 6 or 8 hours. You know, I remember being fascinated by it, but can you talk a little bit more about what the controversy was? I don't remember.
The controversy was well, first of all, not many people saw the film, but there were some people who took a strong point for the film. Most notably, Susan Sontag wrote a huge essay in favor of the film. And Silberberg later got picked up by Coppola, and there was plans of him making an American film. The idea of Hitler, a film from Germany, was basically to make Hitler not an individual subject, but a puppet of the bigger history of Germany. Germany being a nation, like that, I'm very superficial now, but Germany being a nation that has never been, so to speak, a political nation, but always a cultural and aesthetic nation. And Hitler being more or less a Wagnerian hero and not so much like a fascist hero, and coming from not from political responsibility, but somehow from fate, you know, a fateful historical figure. That is the seduction of the film. I don't think it's really the position of Silberberg. It's a little bit more complicated, yeah. But he's trying to kind of like weave something like a field, yeah, that creates this puppet Hitler, yeah. And he's also like the first, you could say, who is showing Hitler as a ridiculous character. Not the first one, because there were already these, when a few years before, there were these diaries by his chamberman, the guy who helped him in his daily things, you know, and those observations, and we knew a lot about Hitler before already, that he was a very like twisted character, of course. But 3 years before Silberberg, there was this big found footage film by Joachim Feist. It was called Hitler, a Career. Yeah, it was a montage film, and it was like Feist had also written a huge biography of Hitler that has become under a lot of scrutiny afterwards, because he was very much following the narrations of Albert Speer. You know, anyway. So we had this image of Hitler that was basically constructed of his propaganda movies by Joachim Feist. And then Silberberg gave us a completely different Hitler, a very complicated, complex Hitler that was deeply, although he was Austrian by personal biography, he was a creature, you could say, of the traumatizing, never really becoming a proper state Germany, you know.
Thank you. Interesting. I'll have to send you a film that I made. It was called Human Remains, and it covers 5 dictators, the first one being Hitler, and it touches upon some of the things you just said.
I would definitely appreciate if you sent me the link.
Yes, I will. You know, one thing I wanted to say, and this is a little off topic in terms of cinema, where we were talking about, but a few years ago, at the Berlinale, I went to see German concentration camps, a factual survey. And this was a film that we later showed at the Jewish Film Festival in San Francisco. And it was a very brutal film. It shows images from Buchenwald that have never been seen, some that have been seen, but some that hadn't, put together in England. And, the British liberated Buchenwald. And it was intense. It was at least 2 or 3 hours. And why I'm bringing this up is there was a line around the block at the Berlinale. It was in the evening, and I was just impressed about how interested, at least the German audience at the Berlinale was in still seeing this. And when we brought it to San Francisco, hundreds of people showed up. We had one screening only, and I think there were about 500 or 600 people that came. So when something is like, doesn't have to be narrative, it just could be more truthful in some respects, there's still interest. And that I was very impressed by that.
There's a lot of interest, of course, yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen The State That I'm In by Christian Petzold, called Die innere Sicherheit in Germany. It's a feature film about the terrorist groups of the Red Army faction in Germany. And there is a young girl, like the main protagonist of the film is a 15-year-old girl, yeah, and she goes into a cinema at some point in the film, and it's like an initiating experience for her. And she watches Nuit et Brouillard by René, yeah, Nacht und Nebel, Night and Fog, yeah. I think this is to a certain degree indicative, yeah, that a German girl would have to go to see this classical French Holocaust film, because we don't have anything like it properly. I mean, there's also would have been other possibilities, but nothing that would have been the same, has the same level, the same stature. It had to be this French film. Yeah, there's nothing comparable in Germany. Yeah. And I don't know if you know Christian Petzold's film a little bit. He's, I think, one of the most important contemporary filmmakers. And he did a film a few years ago, was called Phoenix. Did anybody see Phoenix by Christian Petzold?
Yeah.
Definitely. What did you make of it? Because I think this is probably, in my opinion, this is the most important, next to Romuald Kamaka, most important German Holocaust film that we ever had.
Well, I personally, I like the film quite a bit. I'm a big fan of Vertigo. So I liked all the Hitchcockian references, and I thought it was very well made. He also did Transit, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think he's a great filmmaker. I liked it quite a bit. I thought the performance by, was it Nina Hoss?
Nina Hoss, yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, beautiful film. No, we tried, but we didn't. Yeah.
But it was one of those we want to show, but we don't always do it.
I just loved how that film built to that final scene, which is it's at the heart of the movie, and just a heartbreaking and beautiful finale in that film. Very powerful. How did that film do in Germany? How did it connect with the German audiences?
It was quite controversial, and there was a big. Not everybody liked it, but I think what maybe most critics maybe even missed a little bit, but what I think is the crucial point about Phoenix. Phoenix is a film, and it's really like I was flabbergasted by the intelligence of the story, like because this woman, she's basically the last woman to go into the camp, because she gets betrayed very, very late, like in 44 or something, and she's the first one to come back because she doesn't die, but she survives. But of course, in this gap, between her deliverance and when she comes back, basically in this gap, there's the whole Shoah implicitly, yeah, and the story that Petzold tells about it. And this is why I think this film is so important. is, first of all, it's the story about the responsibilities of the contemporary people who were living with Jewish people, even still in 1943, 44, and there were still people going into the camps, And in the same vein, he already tells the story of one person who comes back and who basically refuses for the entire nation that the question gets closed. On the contrary, she opens it again. And I think this, how he tells about everything indirectly, but brilliantly. So everything, also the question of going back to Israel, of going to Palestine, where a state is evolving, the possibility that maybe there could be something like a safe haven, and the question, maybe she can stay back. And also there is these complicated things of identification with the perpetrators, which was dealt with in other films as well, like maybe Liliana Cavani, for example, The Night Porter, and other things. So I think Phoenix is really something that conceptually, I think is probably one of the most audacious and brilliant and intelligent Holocaust films ever, from Germany, and really exceptional, I would even say in this case, even if it touches basically only very systematically on Auschwitz itself.
Yeah, we tend to like films that are more subtle in dealing with the Holocaust. Somehow, at this point in time, they get, at least I think for Josh and I, they get more into our consciousness, into our psyche. The stuff that's been done before, we can hardly watch, to be honest.
I mean, Son of Saul, as you mentioned it's a Hungarian film, but of course, it's one of the most discussed films of the last few years. And I was deeply involved seeing it 2 times, and it had a deep effect on me. But there was also always a little bit this aversion, that I was seeing a brilliantly gifted director displaying his talent in every shot, And I also think that at the end of the day, this idea of blurring out at the margins of the frame, and of blurring out basically everything that is not point of view per se at the moment. I think it also, it's wrong. I mean, it's brilliant, but it's wrong. And if I had to, luckily I don't have to say yes or no to this film, and I can give a more nuanced analysis. But in the end, I didn't buy it, so to speak. I think it gave me a little bit the creeps, that we have now a young man from Hungary who has all this talent. He made another film that was equally ambitious with another topic, but also big historical topic, First World War and everything. Displaying his brilliance, with this topic. I think this topic also requires a little bit of modesty. I don't know, humbleness.
Did you feel it was too much of a gimmick, the subjective point of view?
It was not a gimmick. It was I don't know. I was really wondering if it was. It was the only way to get into the camp this way. You can of course do it like Benini, but Benini does it in a superficial way. But Son of Saul does it in a way. This is the most that you can have of immersion, in a situation that can feel very close. And to me, it felt like it could be very close to how it might actually have felt, And there was even like very important French thinkers like Georges Didier Huberman, who wrote this very important book about the 4 photographs from Auschwitz that are the remaining documents that were made to have a photochemical point of reference to what happened in the crematoriums, And he said what La Nemes does is the cinematic equivalent to these four, like almost hieratic witness photographs. Yeah, so he spoke for the film. Yeah, he really endorsed the film, but I still am not sure if it's really the same. I mean, the book by Didi Übermann is called "Images in Spite of Everything." You know, like those four images, which were made in the crematoriums in 1944, I believe. Yeah, that is the reference point for photorealistic depiction of Auschwitz, but it's also like the point that you should never like compete with. Yeah, and I think Laszlo Németh competes with these images. Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm wondering if the fact that you saw it twice might have something to do with your feeling about it, because I don't think I could watch that film a second time. It kind of gave me what I needed the first time. And the second time, I can imagine, I could be wrong, having a more critical point of view about it.
That's exactly the point. The first viewing blew me away, you know, and I had to kind of like exercise it by watching it again critically, so to speak. Yeah.
But you were talking a bit about German audiences and about Phoenix, but how do, in general, German audience like the Holocaust films? I mean, do they say that, okay, now it's too much, we want another topic, or do they still like it?
Again, it's a little bit difficult to answer because we would have to make a distinction between Holocaust films and Nazi films, yeah. But for the German audience, those are more or less the same, I'm afraid. Yeah? And also we have a lot more Nazi films and not so many Holocaust films. And the Nazi films have worked fairly well, most of them. Also on German television, for example, it's a very popular genre, those history documentaries, because we have a lot of film material from the Nazi years. And they get like re-edited and recombined and remixed, and we see all these things, you know, and Hitler's, like the colored films of Hitler's petting his dog at the Obersalzberg and all these things. So over the last like 30 years, that has been a hugely popular genre. And there was always a little bit the question, in my opinion, if this is a little bit also like a question of titillation, you know, that it's exciting to a certain degree to see these evil figures, you know, who have been like stock characters in Germany for all. Like we know like how Hitler sounded, we know how Goebbels walked, you know, we know what a weird guy Himmler was, you know. There was for a long time there was plans to make a biopic of Leni Riefenstahl, you know, which in my estimation would probably have become something like a redemption story for German cinema after all having been innocent during the Nazi years. But now we had a new biography of Riefenstahl attacking her really like very, very heavily, came out just a few weeks ago, you know, and blaming her that she was even like a part of the Shoah herself, and that she was deeply involved in the Endlösung, not intellectually because she was a stupid person, but mentally, like she shared the idea that the Jews should be extinguished, you know, and so I think this is I would again very broadly speaking. I think Germans are a little bit more fascinated with the evil of the Third Reich, yeah, than with the experience of the Jewish people. There's no doubt there's a lot of people who deeply sympathize with the experience and who really worried, who are sad about that, and who regret deeply if they could do anything against it, which is not possible, of course, after the fact, you know. But there's also, there's this sense that it's a very fascinating thing still, the Hitler years, you know. And they look a little bit more at Hitler in general and a little bit less at the victims.
But are there German films about Jews, but not about the Holocaust, not about the Nazis, not about the legacy of the World War? I mean, maybe films like the ones of Woody Allen, about a German Jew who is just living his life, his or her life, and fell in love. And of course, he's fascinated about the fact that, okay, I'm a Jew, but not because, okay, I'm a Jew and my grandmother died and all this kind of stuff.
There are, and there was one very important one, again, by Dani Levy, who is probably the Woody, who would also even like think of himself a little bit of being the Woody Allen of Germany. He made a film called Alles auf Zucker. It's a film about a typical Jewish family. Yeah, like we know the stereotype. It's a stereotype that is even exploited by a lot of Jewish directors around the world. That Jewish families are very much alive because they are very difficult, you know, and they are like Jewish humor is a part of the difficult experiences that Jewish people had. And there's like this Alles auf Zucker was a big success in fact, yeah. And it was basically like that was the first, not normal, but the first Jewish family in German cinema that was basically claiming to have something like, as much as it, of course, still troubled, an everyday life, you know, and to have something like a legitimate craziness, yeah, but it's not one that would warrant conflict, you know. It's just there, yeah. And I think this is, that was quite, I think it was in 2005 or something, like 15 years ago. That was a crucial film. Apart from that, we could say a few words maybe about Frau Stern, which is a film that is also shown in Budapest. You know, it's a very interesting character. I believe Joshua and Jay may also have seen this film. Did you?
What's the English title?
It's called.
Yeah, Mrs. Stern, Frau Stern.
Oh yeah, we saw that, right?
Did you manage to see it, Joshua?
Yeah, I have seen it. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I'm refreshing maybe you can refresh my memory.
It's basically about this old woman in the hipster area of Berlin.
Oh yeah, we saw it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, that actually brought up a lot of questions for us on whether or not this type of film could attract a younger audience, which is, I think, something that all festivals struggle to do, but especially when it's a Jewish niche festival like ours, you know, would younger people be interested in seeing this? So I'm curious how that played in Germany. Did younger people seek this film out?
The film was quite a bit of a success, given the fact that it was basically a no-budget production. Like it did not come from the system of subsidized films in Germany. The young director is basically a little bit of a very interesting young man. He also knew that he had to seize the moment because his protagonist, he knew that she was already very old when they shot the film, and he wanted to make a documentary about her first. But then it turned out to be this sort of fictionalized, but it's very much herself in the film. And the whole point of the film is that this woman is kind of like a local hero for the generation of the 20, 25-year-olds in this area of Berlin called Neukölln. You know, she lives amongst them, and she shares their slacker lives, you know, to a certain degree. And she's a very original person. Yeah, and she's very attractive in this, in her flakiness, in her weirdness, in a way. Yeah, but it's important. It's important. It's not important, but it's still worth noting that she's not a Holocaust survivor. She actually survived, or she spent the years of the Nazis in Israel and came to Germany after the war. Yeah, but she's still framed a little bit in the film. It's like if you don't ask about it, you could still think she, because from her date of birth, she would have been a potential victim of the Shoah, of course. She survived, but she's not per se a Holocaust survivor. Yeah? But I think she's nevertheless a stand-in for the generation that gets lost now, because now the last people who have personal memories of those years, they are dying, and now we are really entering into second, third generation, different types of memory. Yeah.
She reminded me a little bit of the Ruth Gordon character in Harold and Maude.
Mm-hmm.
There was something about that. Yeah, we like that film. And the Danny Levy, the one you were talking about, was that the Go for Zucker or something like that, or what?
Alles auf Zucker. I don't know what the English title is. I will look it up.
Because the festival has shown a lot of his work through the years, before Josh and I even worked there.
Yeah, I think Levy's work is very interesting. It's even if it's not necessarily about Judaism, there is a Jewish sensibility to it, which is very similar, like you said, to Woody Allen. Is every film that Woody Allen makes a Jewish film, regardless if it's about Jews per se? There's just a certain Jewishness to it. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing in Levy's work.
Exactly. The title in USA was Go for Sucker. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Festival showed that.
Maybe just use the expression that Holocaust as entertainment. And I wanted to ask, do you think that making a movie about the Holocaust can be appealing to filmmakers because maybe they think that they will get some awards from the juries and they will get invited to the festivals because Holocaust is such an appealing topic? Is this true, do you think?
Well, I'm going to say something about that. I think that was true for many years with the Academy Awards, specifically the documentaries. There was almost like several years where if you had a Holocaust film that attracted a lot of attention, it would inevitably be nominated for Academy Award and possibly win an Academy Award. I don't see that to be the case anymore. I think it's a topic that people, unless it's done really original and goes to a new place, that people are kind of tired of the same subject over and over. So I don't think they're as big award winners as they used to be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, we're seeing, I guess Jojo Rabbit is probably a good example of something that's a little bit of a different take, whether you like the film or not, is different and did attract, some awards.
I'm just having a look at the moment, like to take a little sample of the films of the last 20, 25 years in Germany that got awarded the German Film Prize, the German Film Award, like the equivalent to the Oscar. And it's a very quick look, but in the last 30 years, there was only one film that had a topic that was related to what we are talking about. It was The State Against Fritz Bauer, a fictionalized account of this very important lawyer who was seminal in the Auschwitz process in the 60s. Yeah, so this is reminded of this, like is in the memory of this very important character. But all the other films since basically the Germany got reunified, were completely other topics. Yeah, so there is nothing per se that would hint on that we should recommend to young filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers, to compete with a Holocaust film for prizes and audience attention in Germany.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying this earlier. I think it'll be interesting to see what the next generation of filmmakers who might be, you know, fourth generation removed from a relative who maybe was, you know, a Holocaust survivor, what these films will look like. Will there be a re-interest? Will it be about the trauma that's gone through generations? Will it be trying to understand what their great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents went through? I think, you know, we could really see a very different type of Holocaust film coming in the next decade.
And if we are talking about the Holocaust movies in Germany, but what about the other historical topics, the other traumas of the German nation? How do they depicted in Germany? Do you have a lot of historical films apart from the Holocaust?
There has been plenty of historical topics, and in all types of movies, actually, documentary, fiction film, also like auteur cinema or more popular cinema. Of course, there has been a lot of things about the revolution of '89 and what followed, you know, about the reunification. There have been a lot of very interesting films trying to come to terms with the experience of the GDR. You know, there were very important films like immediately after 1989, but also like more recently. Maybe it's worth mentioning for at least one director, Thomas Heise. He's a documentary filmmaker. He made a film called Heimat ist ein Raum aus Zeit that is also actually a Jewish story. And that is one of the most important films. It came out last year about a German family in the 20th century. There have been a lot of films about the 70s in Germany, about the period of radical left-wing terrorism. And in general, history is a very important topic. I think it's probably, if we don't speak only about films, but also about television series, which is, of course, the thing that is the most popular and the thing that is booming at the moment in German popular culture. Babylon Berlin is a series about the German historical experience in the 20th century in the emerging, under the conditions of an emerging fascism. But there have been a lot of other things, like, for example, there's on Amazon, it's a show, it's called Germany 83, 86, 89. You know, it takes the entire decade of the 80s from the point of view of a GDR secret agent. Yeah. So there's a lot of these things, and there's even people who say, and I think they have a point, you know, that history, national history, is one of the main assets that Germany has to sell, also to sell these topics on the global markets of entertainment, you know.
For the end, I wanted to ask your favorite movies. Bert, you said that Phoenix is the most important German film about Holocaust. What do you think, Joshua and Jay? What are your favorites?
Favorite German film about the Holocaust, or that takes place in the Holocaust specifically? Is that
or about the Jews? Anything about the topic?
It's a tough question to answer. I don't know. I'm stalling. Jay, you have a.
I don't know if this is my favorite, but the film that Bert mentioned, I know I liked a lot, which is the English title was The People versus Fritz Bauer. I thought that was quite good. I also did like Phoenix quite a bit. Let's see.
We should film about Hannah Arendt, which was particularly good.
Which one?
The Hannah Arendt film.
by Mariana Bontrota.
Mm-hmm.
We had this on our list, but I don't know, maybe it was a German co-production, but Agnieszka Holland's Europa. Is that considered a German film?
It's considered a Polish film, but and I think Agnieszka Holland is very much a Polish filmmaker. We should not nationalize her for Germany.
No, I just thought maybe it was a co-production because we had it on our list. But I remember liking that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the film I mentioned earlier, German Life, the documentary, also.
That's Austrian, by the way.
Right.
And she was over 100. But that was quite amazing. I don't know if you guys saw that film by three Austrian filmmakers called A German Life. It was about, was it Himmler's secretary?
I can't remember if it was Himmler or Goebbels.
I think it was Himmler's secretary, or,
But probably Phoenix for narrative films in more recent times. I mean, it's a pretty incredible film.
Thank you very much for answering my questions. And in normal times, I would ask the audience if they have questions, but these are not those times. So I just want to thank you for being here, and I just want to thank the audience for being here. So that's a goodbye, I think. And
thank you.
Have a good day in San Francisco.
Thanks for having us.
Night in Berlin.
Nice to meet everybody.
Yes, nice to meet you as well. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.